Rain drummed softly against the glass walls of the city's most elegant restaurant. The world outside was gray and quiet, but inside, crystal chandeliers shimmered like frozen tears. At a corner table, Ethan Hayes sat straight back in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people earned in a year. Yet, despite the gold watch on his wrist and the wealth behind his name, his eyes carried a weight that no money could lift. Beside him sat a little girl, 6 years old, with golden curls and a pink ribbon that refused to stay tied. "Daddy," she whispered, tugging at his sleeve, "can I have pancakes instead of pasta?" He smiled faintly, the kind that doesn't quite reach the eyes. "Anything you want, sweetheart." As the waiter left, the child hummed quietly, tapping her tiny fingers on the table. Ethan watched her, the only person who could melt the ice around his heart. He had promised himself he'd give her the world, even if he had to hide the cracks in his own. Just then, a waitress approached their table, young, tired, yet graceful in her simple uniform. She placed the menus down with a soft smile. The moment she turned away, the little girl froze. Her eyes widened. She pointed. "Daddy." "That's Mommy." Ethan's world stopped. His chest tightened. He turned slowly, unsure if his mind was playing tricks. But when his gaze met the waitress's eyes, hazel, trembling, familiar, the air left his lungs. "Before we dive deeper, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? It always amazes me how far a single story can travel. Drop your city. Let's see how wide kindness still spreads." The waitress blinked, clearly startled. "I'm sorry, sir, did I forget your order?" Her voice was steady, but her hands shook slightly, betraying something deeper. Ethan opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He hadn't seen Grace in years, not since she'd walked out with nothing but a suitcase and tears staining her cheeks. And now she was here, standing just a few feet away, wearing a name tag and an exhausted smile. "Lily," he murmured, trying to sound calm. "That's not Mommy, you must be mistaken." But Lily shook her head firmly, eyes glassy. "No, Daddy, I remember her. That's Mommy." Grace froze mid-step, her tray trembling. She couldn't breathe. The child's voice, soft and pure, cut through every wall she'd built to survive. She'd spent years avoiding this exact moment, years convincing herself that Ethan had moved on, that their daughter would never remember her. Now, both those lies shattered in a heartbeat. "Grace?" Ethan finally whispered, his voice cracking under years of buried pain. She blinked fast, forcing composure. "I think you're mistaken, sir. I just started working here last week." The manager's voice called from across the room. "Grace, table 7 needs their check." She nodded quickly, escaping before Ethan could say another word. He sat frozen, unable to move, watching the door swing behind her. Lily looked up, confused and on the edge of tears. "Daddy, why did Mommy leave?" He swallowed hard, staring into his daughter's pleading eyes, the same eyes that once belonged to Grace. "Sometimes," he whispered, "grown-ups make mistakes they can't fix." Lily frowned. "But you can fix it, right?" Ethan didn't answer. His silence was heavy, filled with memories, laughter in a small kitchen, the warmth of a hug, the day he let pride speak louder than love. He stood abruptly, tossing a few bills on the table. "Come on, sweetheart. We're leaving." But Lily stayed seated, stubborn like her mother. "I don't want to go. I want Mommy." Ethan's voice broke, softer now. "She's not coming back." At that exact moment, Grace leaned against the kitchen wall, tears spilling silently. Behind the door, she could hear everything. Her heart ached, not from regret alone, but from the sound of her daughter's voice calling for her. Fate had just thrown 3 broken hearts back into the same room, and none of them knew what to do next. If you were there in that moment, what would you have done? Be honest. Comment your answer below. And if words fail you, Just hit like to prove that compassion still matters. Ethan stood outside the restaurant, rain soaking his expensive suit, his mind spinning. He looked at Lily, clutching her stuffed bunny, staring at the door as if hoping her mother would appear. For the first time in years, Ethan realized something terrifying. All his success, all his pride, meant nothing if the person he truly loved was still missing from their lives. He glanced back one last time through the glass, just as Grace appeared. Wiping her eyes, pretending to smile at another customer, his heart ached with the truth he couldn't escape. She wasn't gone, she was just surviving. And maybe, just maybe, there was still time to make things right. The ride home was silent except for the rhythmic hum of the car's tires against wet asphalt. Lily pressed her forehead to the window, tracing raindrops with her fingertip. Ethan glanced at her through the rearview mirror, her reflection small, quiet, lost in thoughts too heavy for someone her age. He wanted to speak, to distract her, to say anything that would erase the look in her eyes. But words failed him. The image of Grace, her trembling hands, the way she bit her lip to hold back tears, wouldn't leave his mind. When they reached the mansion, the automatic gates opened slowly, the lights from the driveway spilling across the sleek black car. It was a palace, but it felt empty. Always had. Lily slipped off her shoes at the door and climbed the staircase to her room without a word. Ethan stood there, watching her small figure disappear into the hallway. He loosened his tie, exhaling shakily. The silence of the house pressed on him. Every polished surface, every expensive painting, mocked the hollowness of his life. He poured himself a glass of water and sat at the dining table, the same table where, years ago, Grace had laughed as she taught Lily how to clap to a song. Back then, they didn't have much, just love and noisy mornings, and he had thrown it all away. He rubbed his temples. "What have I done?" he whispered to himself. The next morning, sunlight crept through the curtains. Lily appeared at the breakfast table, dressed for school but unusually quiet. "Morning, sweetheart," Ethan said softly. "You okay?" She nodded, poking her cereal with a spoon. "Daddy, are we going to see Mommy again?" Ethan froze mid-sip. "Lily, I told you." She looked sad, Lily interrupted. "Why can't we help her?" He looked away, guilt twisting inside him. How could he explain that helping Grace meant reopening wounds he had stitched shut with pride? That the last time they spoke, words had turned to weapons. "Finish your breakfast, okay?" he said gently. Lily frowned. "You're scared." The truth hit harder than he expected. "Maybe I am." She slipped off the chair and ran upstairs, leaving him alone with his thoughts. That evening, after hours of staring at his office computer without reading a single email, Ethan grabbed his coat. He couldn't take it anymore. The guilt, the questions, the silence. He drove back to the restaurant. Through the glass window, he saw Grace wiping down tables, her hair pulled back, her movements slow but graceful. She looked older, thinner, yet somehow stronger. He stepped inside. The bell above the door chimed softly. Grace looked up, her expression tightening the moment she recognized him. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. "I just needed to talk." "There's nothing to talk about." "Grace, please." His voice cracked. "You can hate me all you want, but Lily," her eyes softened at the mention of her daughter's name. "She's beautiful," Grace whispered, fighting tears. "I never thought I'd see her again." "Then why did you leave?" he asked, the question sharper than he intended. She looked away. "You know why. You made it clear there was no place for me in your world." "That was years ago." "Pain doesn't know years, Ethan," she said, finally meeting his eyes. "It just sleeps until you walk in and wake it up again." The restaurant had grown quieter. A few curious glances flicked their way, but no one dared interrupt. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said softly. "I was angry, stupid. You were proud," she cut in. You cared more about reputation than love. Ethan didn't argue. He could single quotes D. Grace turned to leave, but he reached out, gently stopping her hand. Please, let me make it right. Just one chance. For Lily. For a long moment, Grace said nothing. Then she whispered, It's not me you should be asking. Ethan blinked. What do you mean? She's the one who cried for her mother every night. She's the one you told lies to so she'd stop missing me. If you want forgiveness. Grace swallowed hard. Ask her first. She pulled her hand away and disappeared into the kitchen. Ethan stood there. Rooted, guilt crashing through him like waves. Outside. The city lights blurred through the rain once more, the same way they had the night everything fell apart. Have you ever had someone help you when no one else would? Write yes, and tell me their name. Maybe gratitude can travel further than we think. Ethan drove home in silence. He parked the car and sat in the dark for a long time, watching raindrops race down the windshield. His phone buzzed, a message from Lily's teacher. Lily seemed withdrawn today. Is everything okay at home? He typed and erased 3 different replies before simply writing, She just misses someone. When he finally went inside, he peeked into Lily's room. She was asleep, her stuffed bunny tucked under her chin. In the dim light, her tiny hand rested on a drawing beside her pillow, a family of 3, holding hands, smiling. Ethan's chest tightened as he knelt beside her bed. She still believes we can be that, he whispered, tears slipping down his cheeks. And maybe she's right. He brushed her hair gently, his heart heavy with both love and regret. For the first time in years, he prayed, not for success, not for wealth, but for a second chance. The next morning, Ethan woke earlier than usual. The mansion was quiet, sunlight spilling in soft golden streaks across the marble floor. For years, this silence had felt like peace. Now it felt like punishment. He walked into Lily's room. She was still asleep, her little arm hanging off the bed, clutching the drawing from last night. He smiled faintly, kissed her forehead, and whispered, I'm going to fix it, my love. By the time Lily woke up, her father was gone. Ethan stood outside the same restaurant again, this time. Not as a billionaire, but as a man ready to face his own mistakes. Grace was inside, arranging coffee cups before the breakfast rush. He waited until she noticed him, her expression unreadable. Before you say anything, he began softly, I didn't come to fight. I came to listen. Grace hesitated, then nodded toward an empty booth. 5 minutes. That's all. He sat across from her. The scent of freshly baked bread mixed with the faint perfume she used to wear, lavender, subtle, familiar. Grace, he said quietly, you were right. I was proud. I thought love could survive distance, but I was wrong. I built a fortress and locked you out. I thought I was protecting us, but I only ended up alone. She stared down at her apron, twisting the fabric between her fingers. You don't get to fix everything with words, Ethan. Some things break and stay that way. He nodded slowly. Maybe, but I still need to try. She sighed. Why now? Because our daughter called a stranger mommy yesterday, he said, voice trembling. And I realize she knows something I forgot. Love doesn't end when people walk away. Grace blinked fast, fighting tears. Don't do this, Ethan. Don't come back into my life just to disappear again. I can't survive that twice. He leaned forward slightly, his tone sincere. Then let me prove I'm not leaving this time. She looked at him, her eyes a storm of pain and longing. For a moment, neither spoke, the world outside blurred by the sound of rain against glass again. Then, softly, Grace said, You can come tomorrow. After my shift. We'll talk. But only if Lily wants to see me. Ethan exhaled, a flicker of hope lighting inside him. Thank you. She gave a small nod, then turned away before he could see the tear that escaped. That night, Lily waited on the porch, swinging her legs restlessly. When she saw her father's car pull in, she ran to him. "Daddy, did you see Mommy again?" He knelt to her level. "I did." Her eyes sparkled. "Is she coming home?" Ethan hesitated. "She said she'll come see you tomorrow." Lily gasped, covering her mouth with both hands. "Really?" He smiled softly. "Really." She hugged him tight, the kind of hug that made every mistake in his life feel like it could be forgiven. "Daddy," she whispered, "you're not sad anymore." He laughed gently. "Not when you smile like that." The next day came slower than either of them expected. Ethan couldn't focus on work. Lily couldn't stop asking what her mother might say. What she might look like now. When the doorbell finally rang that evening, Lily raced to open it before Ethan could even stand. Grace stood there. Simple white blouse, jeans, and a nervous smile. For a moment, no one moved. Then Lily threw her arms around her waist. "Mommy!" Grace froze, tears spilling instantly as she hugged her daughter tight. "My baby." "Oh, I missed you so much." Ethan stood a few steps away, his throat tight, watching the two people he loved most in the world reconnect. The years between them melted away in that single embrace. When Grace finally pulled back, she looked at Ethan. "She's beautiful." "She's strong," he corrected gently. "Like her mother." Grace smiled through her tears. "You haven't changed much." "Maybe a little," he said. "At least I hope." They sat together in the living room, awkward, quiet, full of ghosts. But Lily's laughter slowly filled the gaps. She showed her mother her drawings, her stuffed bunny, her room filled with pink stars. Grace listened to every word as if she was memorizing each sound. "Now it's your turn. Share one small good thing you did recently. Write it below so others remember that humanity still lives." Your story might light someone's path tonight. As the evening faded, Grace stood to leave. "I should go," she said softly. Lily's smile faded. "Do you have to?" Grace knelt. "Just for now, sweetheart. But maybe we can see each other again soon, okay?" Lily nodded reluctantly, then whispered something in her ear. Grace's eyes widened, then softened. "I'd like that," she said. Ethan walked her to the door. The silence between them was different this time. Not sharp, not cold. Just uncertain. "Thank you," he murmured. "For coming." Grace looked at him for a long second. "I didn't do it for you. I did it for her." He nodded, but his eyes said what his voice couldn't. "Thank you anyway." She turned, stepping out into the night. The sound of rain began again, light and steady. As if the world itself was sighing in relief. Ethan stood in the doorway long after she was gone, watching the rain fall across the driveway, thinking of everything they'd lost, and the fragile thread of hope that had quietly returned, for the first time in years. He didn't feel alone. The next few days unfolded like a fragile dream Ethan was afraid to wake from. Every morning, Lily woke with a sparkle in her eyes, counting hours until she could see her mother again. Every evening, Grace would stop by after work, sometimes just for tea, sometimes to read Lily a bedtime story. Ethan watched quietly, staying in the background, letting the two of them rebuild what time had stolen. Yet deep inside, guilt still gnawed at him. He wondered if Grace only came for Lily, or if, somewhere beneath the hurt, she still felt something for him too. One night, as Grace tucked Lily into bed, Ethan lingered by the doorway. The scene was painfully familiar, the same lullaby, the same gentle hum Grace used to sing when they were still a family. When Lily finally drifted to sleep, Grace turned, startled to find him there. "I didn't mean to intrude," he said softly. She smiled faintly. "You never needed permission to care about her." "I should have back then." Grace walked past him, down the hallway toward the kitchen. He followed, their steps echoing through the quiet house. She poured herself a glass of water. She's been asking if we'll ever live together again. Ethan hesitated. What did you tell her? That life isn't a movie, she replied gently. And sometimes love takes time to heal. He nodded, staring at the floor. She's not wrong, though. Maybe it could. Grace sighed. Ethan. I know, he interrupted. I don't deserve it. But tell me honestly, do you still hate me? Grace froze. The word hate carried too much weight. No, she whispered. I stopped hating you a long time ago. But that doesn't mean I trust you. He looked up, meeting her gaze. Then let me earn it. Her lips parted, but before she could reply, Lily's soft voice called from upstairs. Mommy? Grace smiled sadly. She's having those dreams again. Ethan followed her to Lily's room. The little girl stirred in her sleep, whispering, Don't go, Mommy. Grace sat beside her, brushing hair from her forehead. I'm here, baby. Mommy's right here. Ethan stood by the doorway, watching the woman who once held his world together with nothing but love and patience. He'd spent years believing his success could fill that emptiness. But watching Grace now, the tenderness in her touch, the strength in her voice, he knew how wrong he'd been. Later, as Grace got ready to leave, Ethan walked her to the door again. The night air was cool, the moonlight silver against the driveway. She still wakes up crying sometimes, Grace said quietly. Even after all these years. He nodded. So do I. Grace looked at him then, really looked, and for a fleeting second, she saw the man she once fell in love with. Good night, Ethan, she whispered, and walked away before the moment could pull them both under again. Ethan watched her leave, his heart aching in a way he hadn't felt in years. If that moment hit you hard, leave a. Sometimes one little symbol says what our hearts can't. The next morning, Ethan received a call from Lily's school. The principal's voice was calm but urgent. Mr. Hayes, Lily fainted during class. She's being taken to the hospital for observation. The world blurred. Ethan dropped everything and raced through traffic, his chest tightening with every passing second. When he arrived, Grace was already there, sitting by Lily's bedside, her hands trembling as she held their daughter's tiny fingers. She's okay, Grace said quickly through tears. They said it's exhaustion, maybe stress. Ethan exhaled, relief flooding him. He knelt beside the bed, brushing Lily's hair gently. Hey, sweetheart. Daddy's here. Lily blinked weakly, a sleepy smile forming. Mommy's here too. Grace looked at Ethan, tears spilling silently. For the first time in years, they were both exactly where they belonged, side by side, holding the same fragile piece of hope. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor. As night fell, Grace rested her head against the wall, exhausted. Ethan watched her, noticing how she never stopped checking on Lily, never stopped whispering small reassurances. He realized something then. She had carried their pain alone for years. And yet, she still had love left to give. Grace, he whispered. She looked up, eyes tired. I'm sorry for all of it. For letting pride ruin us. For making you leave. For every night you cried alone. Her eyes softened, but she didn't answer. Instead, she reached out and took his hand. A small, fragile gesture, but enough to tell him that maybe forgiveness wasn't impossible. After all, the room fell silent again. For the first time, that silence didn't hurt. It felt like healing. Be honest. Could you forgive after what they did? Type forgive if you could. Or never, if it would break you too deeply. The next morning, Lily opened her eyes fully, her smile returning. Mommy, Daddy, can we all go home together? Grace and Ethan exchanged a glance. It was the kind of moment that could change everything, or break it all again. Grace hesitated, but then she nodded slowly. Just for today, she said softly. Lily's eyes lit up like sunrise. Best day ever. And as they walked out of the hospital together, for the first time in years, the three of them looked. The future was uncertain. But for that single moment, hope felt real. The drive home from the hospital was quiet but gentle this time. Not the silence of distance, but of comfort. Lily sat in the back seat humming softly, holding both their hands. Grace watched her reflection in the window, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Ethan glanced at her every few seconds, as if making sure she was really there and not a memory that would vanish when the light changed. When they reached the mansion, Lily raced ahead laughing. "Come on, you're too slow." She giggled, her energy back in full bloom. Grace hesitated at the door, her eyes wandering across the polished marble floors, the grand staircase, the walls she hadn't seen in years. Everything looked the same, too perfect, too quiet. "It hasn't changed," she murmured. Ethan stood beside her, voice low. Maybe that was the problem. Grace glanced at him, unsure how to respond. He smiled faintly, then motioned toward the kitchen. "I still can't cook. You probably remember that." That earned a small laugh from her, soft and genuine. "I remember the smoke alarm." He chuckled too, a sound that felt like sunlight after years of rain. For the first time, the air between them didn't feel heavy. Lily's laughter echoed from upstairs as she rummaged through her old toys. "Mommy, Daddy, look, I still have the pink bunny." Grace smiled up the stairs. "She kept it all this time." Ethan nodded, eyes warm. "She never lets go of what she loves." Grace's smile faded just a little. "She must get that from you." He hesitated, his gaze softening. "No, I let go once. I won't again." For a moment, neither moved. The world outside continued as if unaware that two broken hearts were finding their rhythm again. They spent the afternoon together, Lily drawing while her parents talked quietly nearby. Grace told stories of the small apartment she'd lived in, the endless double shifts, the kindness of strangers who helped her get by. Ethan listened silently, guilt flickering in his eyes every time she mentioned hardship. When she mentioned the winter, Lily turned 3. Grace's voice faltered. "She got sick that year. I didn't have the money for proper medicine. I remember sitting by her bed, praying she'd get better. I didn't even know if you'd answer my call if I tried." Ethan's throat tightened. "I would have." "God, Grace. I would have, would you?" She asked quietly. "You were surrounded by people who told you I was beneath you, that I didn't belong in your world." He looked away. "And I was too weak to defend you. That's my greatest shame." The room fell silent. Grace sighed, tears glistening in her eyes. "We can't undo what's been done, Ethan, but maybe we can make peace with it." He nodded slowly. "If you'll let me try." She didn't answer, but she didn't walk away either. "If you believe love still wins." Comment, amen. Let's fill this section with hope. Maybe someone scrolling right now needs to see it. Evening settled softly, painting the sky in shades of gold and lilac. Lily had fallen asleep on the couch, her head resting on her mother's lap. Grace brushed strands of hair from her face, her heart full yet trembling. Ethan stood by the window, watching the last light fade. "You know," he said quietly, "I used to stand here every night, wondering where you were. Whether you were happy, whether you hated me." Grace's voice was barely a whisper. "I never hated you. I just couldn't stay where I wasn't wanted." He turned, eyes glistening. "You were always wanted, Grace. I was just too blind to show it." She looked up at him, her expression torn between pain and tenderness. "People don't change overnight." "I know," he said softly. "But maybe they can start tonight." The silence that followed wasn't cold. It was fragile, like something new taking shape. Grace glanced down at Lily, then back at Ethan. "She needs stability. If we do this, it has to be slow, real." He nodded. "Whatever it takes." She smiled faintly, exhaustion and peace blending in her expression. "You've changed, Ethan. I can see it." He stepped closer but stopped, giving her space. "Then maybe I still have a chance to be the man you believed I could be." Grace looked down, hiding a small smile. "We'll see." Outside, thunder rumbled faintly, but inside, everything felt still. Calm, like the pause before dawn. Ethan reached for a blanket, gently placing it over both of them. Grace whispered, "Thank you," barely audible. As her eyes began to close, for the first time in years, he let himself hope, not for wealth or power, but for forgiveness, for family, for the chance to make right what he'd broken. He looked at them, mother and daughter, asleep in peace, and whispered to the quiet room, "This time, I won't lose them." The house that once echoed with silence now breathed again, warm, alive. The next morning came with the soft glow of sunlight slipping through half-open curtains. Grace woke to the scent of coffee, not from a cafe, but from the kitchen downstairs. For a second, she blinked in confusion. Then she heard it, the clatter of dishes, a muffled curse, and Lily's giggle. She smiled despite herself. "He's really trying." Padding downstairs, she found Ethan standing in an apron that clearly wasn't his, stirring pancake batter with an expression of fierce concentration. Lily sat on the counter, legs swinging, watching him like it was the most fascinating show in the world. "Daddy, you put too much milk," she announced proudly. Ethan sighed, looking helpless. "You're supposed to help me, not judge me, little critic." Grace leaned against the doorway, laughter catching in her throat. "She's right. That's more soup than batter." He turned, startled, then smiled sheepishly. "Caught me. But hey, I didn't burn anything yet." "You still have time," she teased. They laughed together, uneasy. Natural sound that filled the air where tension once lived. When breakfast was ready, slightly misshapen pancakes, but edible, they all sat at the dining table. It wasn't grand like a banquet, just warm and imperfect, like something real. Lily poured syrup with both hands, missing her plate entirely. Ethan laughed and helped her, and for a fleeting moment, Grace felt something she hadn't dared to feel in years: home. After breakfast, Ethan walked out to the garden with her. The morning breeze was cool, carrying the scent of roses. He stopped near the bench beneath the oak tree. "This used to be your favorite spot," he said quietly. Grace nodded. "I used to sit here when I was pregnant with Lily. I thought about what kind of world she'd be born into." He looked down, guilt flickering again. "And I ruined it." She shook her head. "You made mistakes." "We both did. But I'm not here to punish you, Ethan. I just want what's best for her." He turned toward her, his voice low but steady. "Then let me be part of that. Not because I'm rich or powerful, but because I want to be her father. I want to earn it." Grace studied him for a long moment. There was no arrogance in his eyes anymore, only sincerity and something deeply human. "If you mean that," she said softly, "prove it through time, not words." "I will," he promised. She smiled faintly. "Then we'll see. Be honest, could you forgive after what they did? Type forgive if you could. Or never, if it would break you too deeply." Days turned into weeks. Grace stayed in the guest house on the estate, not ready to move back into the mansion, but close enough for Lily to visit both freely. Every morning, Ethan would walk his daughter to school, holding her tiny hand. While Grace watched from the window, neighbors whispered, the billionaire and the woman who once disappeared, but neither of them cared anymore. Their focus was smaller, simpler, building moments that mattered. One evening, as autumn leaves began to fall, Ethan found Grace in the garden again. She was sketching, the same way she used to when they first met. Her hands were steadier now, her eyes calmer. "That's beautiful," he said quietly. She glanced up. "You still remember I draw?" "How could I forget?" He replied. "You used to draw when you were upset, and when you were happy." Grace smiled faintly. And which do you think I am right now? He hesitated, then said, healing. Something softened in her expression. That's a good word. They sat in silence, the evening breeze whispering through the leaves. Lily ran across the lawn, chasing fireflies. Her laughter echoing in the dusk. Grace looked at her daughter. Then at Ethan. She's happier now. She's got both her parents, he said simply. Grace's eyes glistened, and for a moment she couldn't speak. She looked away, her voice trembling. I didn't think I'd ever hear that again. Ethan reached out, gently brushing his fingers against hers. Not a plea, not possession, just connection. You deserve peace, Grace, you both do. She looked at him, and this time she didn't pull away. The night deepened, stars appearing one by one above them. And for the first time in a very long time, the silence between them felt like understanding. Weeks passed, and the world outside seemed to slow down around them. Grace had found a rhythm she hadn't known she was missing. Mornings with Lily's laughter echoing through the garden. Evenings spent sketching under the soft glow of the setting sun. Ethan kept his distance when needed, but was always there when she turned around. It was a quiet sort of healing, fragile but real. One afternoon, as the wind danced through the golden trees, Lily came running up the hill with a bright red leaf in her hand. Mommy! Daddy, look! It's a heart. Grace smiled, kneeling to take it from her. Indeed, the edges had curled perfectly into the shape of a heart. Ethan joined them, crouching down beside her. You've got an eye for beauty, kiddo. Lily giggled, pressing the leaf between their palms. Now both of you hold it. See? It's one heart. Grace hesitated for a heartbeat, then placed her hand against Ethan's. The small, warm leaf trembled between their fingers. The world seemed to fall away for that 1 second. All the mistakes, all the pain, all the silence. Sometimes, Ethan whispered, kids see the truth before adults do. Grace's lips parted, but no words came. Her eyes met his, and something unspoken, something years old, stirred between them. That evening, when Lily was asleep, Grace found herself standing at the edge of the balcony, watching the city lights flicker below. Ethan joined her quietly, 2 mugs of tea in hand. You used to hate tea, she said softly. I still do, he smiled faintly. But I remember you liked it before bed. Old habits. She accepted the cup, the steam curling between them. You're trying too hard. He looked down. Maybe, but if trying is all I have left, then I'll keep doing it. The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. Grace turned to him, the words forming before she could stop them. You know, I never hated you. I hated what you became. What we both became. He nodded slowly. I know. I hated myself too. A long silence settled, thick but tender. Below them, the garden shimmered with moonlight. For a moment, Grace imagined what life might have been if things had gone differently. If pride hadn't come between love. Ethan broke the quiet. You said I have to prove it through time. So let me be there. Not just for Lily, but for you. Grace looked at him, her throat tight. You already are. He blinked, as if her words were too fragile to believe. Then maybe there's still hope. Her gaze drifted to the horizon. Hope's a stubborn thing. It never really dies. It just hides until we're ready to see it again. If you believe love still wins, comment, Amen. Let's fill this section with hope. Maybe someone scrolling right now needs to see it. The next day, Grace visited her old neighborhood with Ethan and Lily. It was a modest area, small homes, narrow streets, but full of life. Children played soccer on the road, women laughed over laundry lines. Grace smiled at the familiarity, the simplicity. This is where I learned what happiness really means, she told Ethan. He looked around, humbled. I used to think happiness had a price tag. Guess I was wrong. An old neighbor, Mrs. Patel, spotted Grace and hurried over, tears in her eyes. "Grace, it's been years." She hugged her tightly. "We thought you'd moved forever." Grace smiled. "I almost did, but some things pull you back." Mrs. Patel looked over her shoulder and noticed Ethan standing there, holding Lily's hand. "And that must be your husband?" Grace paused, then smiled softly. "He was. Maybe he will be again someday." The old woman's eyes crinkled with warmth. "Then take your time, dear. Good hearts always find their way back." As they walked back to the car, Lily skipped ahead, humming to herself. Ethan glanced at Grace, emotion flickering in his eyes. "Do you think she's right?" Grace met his gaze. "Maybe, if we don't give up this time." He nodded, a small smile forming. "Then let's not." They stood there for a moment, two people who had lost everything, but somehow found the courage to try again. The world didn't owe them forgiveness, but maybe it was offering them grace instead. That night, the house was quiet except for the soft ticking of the clock and the gentle rhythm of rain against the windows. Grace sat by Lily's bedside, brushing strands of hair away from her daughter's sleeping face. The child clutched her favorite stuffed rabbit tightly. Smiling faintly even in her dreams, Grace whispered, "You brought us back together, sweetheart." She stood, tucking the blanket around Lily one last time, and walked to the hallway. There, under the dim golden light, Ethan was waiting. He held a framed photograph, one taken years ago, before everything fell apart. It was of them, smiling in a small cafe, her hand resting over his. "I found this in a box," he said quietly. "I used to look at it whenever I thought I'd lost everything." Grace took the photo gently. The image was slightly faded, but the emotion in it was still alive. "We were so young, so sure we had forever." Ethan exhaled. "Maybe we still do, just a different kind of forever." For the first time in years, she didn't argue. The silence between them was soft now, no longer heavy with pain but filled with unspoken forgiveness. She turned toward the window, watching the rain slide down the glass like silver threads. "You know," she said, "I think she always knew." "Who?" Ethan asked. "Lily. Kids feel things before they understand them. Maybe that's why she pointed to me that day. She didn't remember my face, she remembered my heart." Ethan's voice broke. "She's got your heart, Grace." She looked back at him, eyes shimmering. "And yours, too. She's what we did right." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Not jewelry this time, a folded paper note. He handed it to her. Grace unfolded it slowly. It wasn't a love letter. It was a drawing, lilies in bright crayons. 3 stick figures holding hands under a giant red heart. Above them were the words, written in wobbly letters, "My family." Grace's hand flew to her mouth. Tears spilled before she could stop them. "When did she?" "This morning," Ethan whispered. "She said she wanted to give it to you but forgot after school." Grace pressed the paper to her chest, trembling. "She brought us home." Ethan nodded, stepping closer. "Maybe it's time we stop running from it." Outside, thunder rolled faintly, but the storm was passing. The air smelled like renewal. Grace turned, looking up at him, really looking, and for the first time, she saw not the man who had hurt her, but the one who had learned to love again. "I can't promise everything will be easy," she said softly. "But maybe we can start small." He smiled, eyes glistening. "Small is enough." She nodded. "Then, stay for breakfast tomorrow. Lily will want pancakes." His laugh cracked in the quiet. "You sure? You remember how that went last time?" "I'll supervise this time," she teased, a hint of lightness in her tone. Ethan looked at her for a long moment before whispering, "Thank you, Grace." "For what?" "For letting me try again." She smiled through her tears. "For once, Ethan." Just say goodnight." He hesitated, then leaned forward, brushing a soft kiss against her forehead. "Goodnight." She closed her eyes, letting the warmth linger. The pain wasn't gone, but it had softened, like a scar that no longer hurt when touched. If this story moved you, don't scroll past quietly. Tap like, not for me, but for the soul who carried this pain and still stayed kind. One click can be your way of saying, "I felt you." The next morning, sunlight poured through the windows, golden and alive. Lily's laughter filled the kitchen as Ethan flipped pancakes with exaggerated seriousness. Grace sipped her tea, smiling at the chaos. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel empty. It felt lived in. "Daddy, you did it!" Lily cheered as a perfect pancake landed on her plate. Ethan bowed dramatically. The crowd goes wild. Grace laughed, a sound full of peace, not guarded anymore. She met his eyes across the table. No grand speeches, no promises. Just quiet understanding. Life wasn't perfect, but it was real again. And in that imperfection, they found something far greater than wealth or pride. They found family. The little girl who once pointed to a waitress and said "Mommy" had unknowingly rebuilt a home, and as the morning sun touched their faces, Grace finally whispered the words she had carried for years, soft, steady, and true. "Welcome home."